Hi, this is Bill Walter. Want to learn more about trains? Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central for The Train Station. It's right here on tncradio.live.
Hello and welcome to tncradio.live. This is Keep On Talkin' with your host, Tom Kyrk. Tom is an over-the-road driver with over 2 million safe miles. On this show, he interviews the people who help make the trucking world happen. It's real life, live from the road.
Tonight's guest, Jerry Fritts, who's driven truck for longer than many of us have been alive. He's been there in the union days, an owner-operator, has helped explore new technologies, a TA Citizen award-winning driver, Red Cross volunteer, overcome many adversities among many other things. Let's find out a little bit more about Jerry Fritts and what it's like to be real life, live on the road with Keep On Talkin'.
Jerry, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in trucking?
All right. Born 1946. So that makes me 75 years old today. And I was born and raised at a dairy farm, a family dairy farm. In fact, we just found some pictures here today. I knew they were around. Okay, when did you get started in trucking, really? In addition to being dairy farmers, we're also cattle dealers and grain and hay and stuff like that. So we had 2 trucks in addition to the farm machinery. And this question has been asked before, and I found it today. My father, when did you first begin to somehow see the something of driving? We have a picture of me wrapped up in little blankets, is not more than a newborn baby, sitting on my father's lap on my first articulated vehicle. Now, some people, what do you mean an articulated vehicle? Well, 2-piece vehicle, tractor and trailer. Well, this so happens was a farm haulage tractor pulling a manure spreader, or just a manure, but it had to be backed up and handled pretty much the same way.
Yep.
It shows my father holding me in little blankets and stuff. Somehow or other, I'd put my hand out to touch the steering wheel on that farm haulage. So really, I started my driving career within weeks of being born. It's like
you might have the record for the longest driving career. Did you have a CB handle, and if so, how did you get it?
Okay, I did have a CB handle, but I got into it late. And I don't know whether you realize, it was a little on the naughty side, but I actually used to have like a traveling road show. There was a driver out of the roadway out of Toledo, Ohio, who was saying, we could run up and down the road. I used to come up with poems and rhymes and stories, and it's a little on the naughty side, but not dirty. So my handle was the Nookie Monster.
The Nookie Monster.
The Nookie Monsters, Dolly Parton's bosom buddy.
Okay, I have to ask, how did you get to be Dolly Parton's bosom buddy, the Nookie Monster?
I don't know. It just came to me one day. I come up with people say I'm very, very witty. I could be kind of very funny. And then get this. You know those little footballs we had when we were kids about half size?
Yep.
I used to carry that in the truck to show other drivers because they could know who you are and stuff like that. It was a whole different world. That was my Nookie Monster pacifier.
That works. That works.
I swear, Tom, I come up with these stories and rhymes, and we ran the same region about 1,000 miles or about 500 miles from Milton, Pennsylvania. But there used to be a lot of base stations then. And I guess I am pretty witty. I can come up with some of the damnedest stuff and when where it come from. But there were base stations, a lot of women like the Nookie Monsters, a little on the naughty side. And they would hear you coming. They also knew kind of how these trucking companies back then scheduled. They knew Sunday everybody dispatched. So sometimes I go to Cincinnati, Ohio. Other guys would go to Maine. Other drivers come back in Hey, Nookie Monster. In fact, that's what they got to call me instead of my name, or Fritz. Hey, Nookie Monster, I had to take all your mail and everything because they knew about what time we left Milton. We'd be around Newburgh, New York, about 4 in the afternoon.
Yep.
And they knew that the handles of other drivers of different companies. Say here, Interstate, we call them dollar sign coming in. They go, hey, where's the Nookie Monster? Where's the Nookie Monster? And they say, well, he went to Cincinnati. Oh, we like the Nookie Monster. And so the drivers come back and say, that's crazy. You know, we had to take your mail and all this at your fan club. And then going the other way out around Acura, and there's a lady out there, used to call herself Sugar Titty. And she would hear me coming. And you didn't do anything obnoxious because there could be children listening. You had to respect that. So this is an adult way of doing things and never really used a bad word, so to say. But I used to have things that, you know, I described myself a big, long-legged, lop-eared, bug-eyed, buck-toothed, bald-headed, cross-eyed, knock-kneed, bow-legged, pitcher-toed, so on and so forth. And I was good at rhymes. And I had one where I go to professional prospecting, pandering, philandering, primary, propane, perfect, puckering, portable practice, and private, perpetual, picker, pack, and pea picker. And it would go on. And then we had our stories we'd tell, you know, I was good at this. Other drivers got to laughing, you know. And then there was a driver out of Toledo, Ohio for Roadway, Ralph. And he had his own little thing. It keep the drivers awake, and it was a whole lot of fun. And like one day I'm sitting there, the terminal driver comes in, he says, oh man, what a trip I had. What do you mean? He said, I had to run across Ralph and Nookie Monster at the same time, you know. And they'd shake their heads. You know, it was all back then. Some of the stuff so it was just the Nookie Monster, Dolly Parton's bosom buddy. So we know what that means, but still not very. Yeah. And, you know, we were big. You probably see 100 interstates between Toledo, Ohio, and Milton, Pennsylvania. We're one of the giants. And we drove a different truck every day. And back then, there were a lot of CB radios and four-wheelers. And they would get onto this, and they know he's out here somewhere. And there would be people going by looking up to see if I was the one, and be laughing like crazy. Many times, they'd even join in. And, I had some of the dance. But it was good to do that and be clever at the same time, you know. So
exactly.
Ralph had a very distinctive voice. I guess I do too. And so one day, now get this, Ralph had gotten fired by Roadway. A different era of trucking, and truck drivers back then were about halfway mechanics anyway, all were using the farm. So Roadway, Interstate Roadway, and a couple of others, we would sit right out there 80 miles an hour, 55 mile an hour speed limit. In fact, one time I got a ticket, brought it home and said to the wife, I said, make out a ticket. She said, whoa, a long time since I've seen one under 70 mile an hour. So we all had 3 or 4 different driver's licenses and stuff. Yeah, one of those two. So anyway, Roadway cut their trucks way back to like 62 miles an hour. And there was a very easy way of just pulling the hoods up on these trucks and these Detroits, and you take 2 screws out of the back of the fuel pump, and they could just turn the RPMs to these things. The Roadway finally got it figured out, this, that, and the other thing. So when they cut them back initially, they thought they had it done. Well, somebody figured out that if you'll pull the hood over in the truck and took one of those hood springs, somebody tried to show me one, and I said, no, I don't want to know, because you get fired for this. I'd be tempted, right? And take that hood spring. Right. They'd take the left valve cover off the engine. Yeah. 2 big knobs. Take the left valve cover off, and they would take that hood spring and hook it to an injector piece in there that would open up the rack and hook it onto a stud. Well, the next thing you know, we got 80 mile an hour roadways again and more. The only difference was it idled about 200 RPMs higher. Roadway finally catches on to it. So Ralph comes into Toledo one day, and some of these guys had forgotten to take these hood springs off when they got to the terminal. The mechanics are pulling the hoods up, and the hoods are dropping on the ground. Ralph gets caught. And I mean, Ralph, the Nookie Monster, we were probably the 2 of the most famous. And they drivers that ran from way out of the west back east, you know, And
Yep.
you could hear him say to another interstate driver, "Where's that nookie monster at today?" Because we kept him awake. We made him laugh and stuff. We had fun, right? And so Ralph and I really had pretty good reputations. So I heard he got fired. Ralph had like 6 kids. So he got on with a meat haul outfit I'd heard about. And finally, through the union thing, he gets back to work. I'd heard that. So one day I'm coming across the Poconos, coming westbound there, and I was east of Interstate 81. And I thought, that's Ralph. I know it is. He must have got back to work. He used to call himself Ralph J. Twin Stacks, because Roadway was one of the few unionized, those kind of companies actually had twin stacks. And a lot of guys love this twin stack stuff. So, okay, here we go. And he had a very distinctive voice and a very distinctive cadence to his voice, with his voice. So I hear him coming. So I wait till he gets close enough. And I said, finally I broke in there. I says, Mr. Ralph, are you that Roadway Ralph? He said, yeah, I am. I said, well, you might be the person I need to talk to. He said, okay, driver, let me see if I can help you. I said, well, let me get my bill of lading here. I'm pretty good at this. Let me get my bill of lading here. I said, oh, okay, here it is. I says, I've got a load of 41,000 pounds of hood springs directed to Ralph J. Twin Stacks, Director of the Fleet Improvement Program, Roadway Express, Toledo, Ohio. This is how cool we can be, right?
Yep.
And it breaks there for a moment. He says, sir, that load of hood springs going to Ralph J. Twin Stacks, Roadway Express, Toledo, Ohio. He says, would you please return that to the shipper by special request? The Fleet Improvement Program has been dropped by special request of the Home Office. Now, get this. This goes on for like 4 or 5 years. I never met Ralph. Never met him. He knew my voice. A lot of people knew the voice. So one time at a truck show, was it Dallas or Louisville? I'm sitting at a round table. This is a long time I became an owner-operator even. And we're sitting at this round table with 4 or 5 other people. I kind of joined or got invited to join a group. And Ralph and I are sitting, this guy is sitting right next to me. And I see him looking at me and looking at me. He says, when you worked for Interstate, he says, were you out of Milton, Pennsylvania? I said, yeah. He said, oh, okay. He says, what was your radio handle? I says, Nookie Monster. And he gets this big grin, puts his hand out, and he says, pleasure to meet you. I'm Ralph.
For many drivers, the CB radio was a way to get to know each other, make friends, some of whom they may never meet face to face, some whom they'd only know on the radio. This is your chance to get to know Jerry Fritts, and we'll learn more about him after this break.
Hey drivers, did you hear music on TNCRadio.live that you really liked? Or maybe you heard us interview an author of a book you'd like to read or listen to. You can get the books, music, and other products you hear about by going to our website at www.tncradio.live and clicking on the shopping cart.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 best scenic drives for truck drivers. One of the many benefits of being a truck driver is traveling the beautiful United States. Truck drivers spend their life on the road. Although they may get tired of driving, there's still routes and attractions most look forward to seeing. Whether it be cruising down the coast to California, driving in the Smoky Mountains, or passing through the Arizona desert, truck drivers all have their personal favorites. Here are the 5 most beautiful scenic drives rated by truck drivers. Pacific Coast Highway. The Pacific Coast in California, also called Highway 1, is one of the most iconic scenic drives in the United States. Driving along the Pacific Coast reminds you of a movie or TV show. It's about 650 miles long and runs from Capistrano Beach in Orange County to Leggett in northern Mendocino. San Juan Skyway. San Juan Skyway, a scenic byway in Colorado, is known for its million-dollar views. The byway goes across the San Juan National Forest and has provided truckers with beautiful views of the mountains and landscape. Beartooth Highway. Beartooth Highway in Montana is a 68-mile byway that runs through southwest Montana and northwest Wyoming and goes into Yellowstone National Park. Along this drive, you'll see one of the most diverse ecosystems accessible by vehicle in the United States. Keep in mind that the scenic highway closes in the winter due to adverse winter conditions and typically opens up on Memorial Day weekend. I-64 in West Virginia. West Virginia has some of the most beautiful landscapes on the East Coast. Driving down I-64 in West Virginia feels like you're in a painting. If you have time to stop along your truck route, check out Tamarack, located just off I-64 in Beckley, West Virginia. Tamarack is a unique culture center with art from local artisans and delicious food. If you want the full Appalachian experience, check out Tamarack. Utah's Route 12. Utah's Route 12 is one of the most scenic routes in the United States. It's often called the All-American Road. Also, there are 2 national parks at each end of the road, Bryce Canyon and Capitol Reef, and many other unique scenic views. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Welcome back to Keep On Talkin' on tncradio.live. Here's Tom Kyrk.
We refer to things being as American as apple pie and baseball. But in trucking, is there anything more American than a long-nosed truck, a CB radio, some apple pie, and a truck stop to have it in and socialize with your fellow drivers? Jerry shares some stories both from the past when he's first started in trucking, as well as some more current memories about some of the fun and mischief that drivers could get up to at their local truck stop, restaurant, and diners.
Before we had CB radios, when you're in a truck stop, the Spectre drivers kind of set with the Spectre drivers, roadway set with roadway, interstate set with interstate. They were all drivers together. We all worked together and help each other. But there wasn't this, it was like a macro camaraderie that developed that within it didn't make difference who you worked for. And pretty soon you're all mutually, and then you had the mutuality too of the Teamsters. But that wasn't spoken about a lot. I think that just laid below the surface. Really didn't hear, well, Spectre and Interstate drivers are buddy because they're all Teamsters. I'll take that back. There was very little, but there was probably, I'll tell you what it was, because most of the companies operated almost exactly the same. Brake balks, relays, and all that type of stuff. So your fundamental operations were almost identical. So you had that foundation to work from.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned here a few minutes ago, Jerry, that's something I want to touch on, is the driver's tables at the truck stops way back in the day. Tell us a little bit about that. I know a lot of drivers may not be familiar with it. A few people might remember the counter of knowledge. But I know I came in 2005 and driver's tables were kind of on their way out.
All right, from what I saw, there was more the round table thing kind of as you moved over towards the southwest, Texas and on out across there. What we had upper Midwest, see, we operated primarily with Interstate Motor Freight of Omaha, Nebraska East, and north of Interstate 70 except for Louisville. And we would take from Minneapolis to Omaha. Now, we did have Denver, but they're kind of an outlier. And to just draw a picture, from Minneapolis to Omaha to Kansas City to Louisville, Kentucky to Washington, D.C., just that quadrant of the country. This outfit was 8th largest carrier in the nation according to revenue. They didn't want to do business anyplace else. So after deregulation, they were forced to kind of open up, and I got moved south. So the round table thing existed more then. Now, up east, it was all the diners. And many of them back then were the old chrome diners.
Yep.
You know, where you actually walked into like a dining car and everything. That was very common. So the big thing there was if you walked in here with your buddies, you'd sit at the table. And to this day, I still see it that way, and I can kind of make it happen that way. But if you sit up at the counter, that's kind of like the open forum. You can join in on conversation back and forth and among the drivers. And if you come in with 3 or 4 buddies, you'd all go sit in a booth. So back then I'd say it was the openness of the counter thing. But even then, You could identify the union outfits. We dressed a little bit differently. Actually, among the big fleets like I'm talking about, and a lot of the union jobs, it was nothing in writing. But you had kind of like an image that existed somehow. And nobody in those outfits, we did not wear blue jeans. We did not wear blue jeans. And you did not wear dicky pants either. Now, when you get down to people had to handle freight, remember, all this stuff that I'm talking about now, I never touched a pound of freight. Interstate Motor Freight, I worked for them 18 years in a week, and only twice in 18 years did I ever stand inside of one of their trailers. Citymen did all that. I didn't do that. So we could, because of the way we worked, actually go to work in shirt and ties and stuff like that, because you really didn't get that dirty. The other part of that was because you had to stay at Holiday Inn or Howard Johnson's or the Statler Hotel up in Buffalo, New York, places like that. You really couldn't walk in there too dirty. So you kind of had, and it reinforced itself too. So you wore dress slacks and dress shirts, or you moved on up to the uniform. Now, some guys with the uniform wore the jacket, some didn't. Some just went to the department store, bought dress slacks, dry clean dress slacks, and always a white shirt, blue shirt mainly, that type of thing. And when we got away from the dry clean part of this, by the way, was a fuel crisis of the early 70s, because dry cleaning almost tripled in cost. So we moved more of the washable slacks. But yeah, you did not go to work. And I couldn't do that. I love appearing like that, but you can't be loading and unloading. And so the industry, in a way, when the drivers, the terminal, hotel, motel, layover type thing, and you almost had to be, you had to fit in almost as much as the business traveling people did. Like Cleveland, Ohio, we stayed at the Howard Johnson's there. That's where they put all the flight crews and stuff like that. You couldn't walk in there with a whole blue T-shirt and dicky pants and scuffed up shoes and stuff. It just didn't fit. So there was also that side of it too. So if you walked in and set up the counter at a truck stop, yeah, the steel haulers were there. Yeah, they had the I wear them now, blue pullover cotton shirt, blue jeans, that type of thing, because that's what their job required. But in a way, it also identified the different segments of the business through its dress. So if you're sitting at the counter there at Snowshoe, and you looked around, you could almost identify so naturally the guys who were a certain way. I didn't know he worked for Jones. I didn't know he worked for Roadway. Not everybody wore uniforms and stuff. So you had more in common there. So the camaraderie would even develop. You know, you're more comfortable among those that are probably living the same lifestyle. You know, one of the problems I'm having a retirement thing. It sounds strange that they all think truck drivers out on the road get lonely. I'll tell you something. Being home every day is when I'm feeling lonely. Around the truck stops and stuff like that, my wife knows it. And I've never met a stranger. But let's say up in Boise, being witty, comfortable with the guys and whatever. The comfortableness of being with your own, of being in that group, it's like another home. So that night walking in, beautiful full moon. If you know the TA in Boise, you go in the back door, this beautiful full moon's coming up in this dark house, wintertime. The sky isn't black, but it's gray, a charcoal gray. And you can see the outline of the mountains. Take your breath away. Stand for a moment and look at it. So walk inside the truck stop. And I stopped there quite a bit. There's one waitress that's got to know me pretty well. She looks up and rolls her eyes like, oh, no, not him again, which, you know, that's pretty nice. So she comes walking over, she's, now, what are you up to tonight? I said, well, I'm going so-and-so. So she says to the other waitress, kind of introduced me. She's an ex-driver, by the way, brunette girl. And and by this time, I know I'm kind of lively. Another driver sitting on either side of me. And she says to the new waitress, ask him how old he is. So I'm 72. And that waitress says, where do you get all this energy? I don't want to come over me. Evidently, I had something to do with the full moon. I knew I had to say something funny. So I stood up. The chair went back. And I raised my hands over my head that night and shook my fist into the air. I says, in this wild look, right? On the nights of the full moon, I double my Viagra. The driver just bust up. The new waitress leans on the counter with her head down, laughing. The other waitress says, I told you to look out for this guy. You never know what's going to happen, you know. But that's kind of like, that's when, you know, if the business creates its own environment, I guess, I don't know. But there used to be a lot of that.
Most truck drivers, like Jerry, enjoy having a good time, teasing their fellow drivers, and the waitresses who understand and get the jokes while we're out here on the road. Obviously, Jerry's got a great sense of humor and, well, a way to tell the story. More talk, as well as real life live from the road, coming up here on tncradio.live.
Be sure to catch the Truckers Network radio show with your host, Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on tncradio.live.
Eating right and eating healthy are two of the toughest challenges truckers face. Sometimes the only way to eat right is to bring food along for the ride. As a professional truck driver, you know that space is limited in your truck cab. Living on the road with limited storage space means you have to get creative on how you store your personal belongings. Drivers will spend weeks away from home, so their semi-truck becomes their home away from home. Truck drivers are pros at making the road feel like home, and stocking up on food is one of the ways they make it feel more like home. With a number of unhealthy food options on the road, drivers need to pack healthier foods and snacks. Food storage is essential to keep your truck clean and organized. It also helps you easily see what foods you have with you on the road. Keep listening to learn some storage ideas for long-haul truck drivers. An electric cooler. An electric cooler is a great way to store perishable items in your truck. They're lightweight and large enough to store and cool down several drinks and snacks. They're also a great alternative to mini fridges. Canned foods. Canned foods are great for truckers because they require little or no preparation. They're also extremely cheap. You may want to consider buying a food warmer if you prefer a hot meal. When storing cans in your truck, we suggest putting them into a container and placing them under the lower bunk. This limits the cans rolling around in your truck while you're driving. Storage containers. Storage containers will be a trucker's best friend when you're on the road. Drawers and storage containers are great for storing clothes, toiletries, and food. 3-drawer storage containers make it easy to organize and store your favorite foods or drinks. Baskets. Baskets allow you to find the food you need quickly and easily. We recommend using clear baskets so you can easily see what's in the baskets. You'll need to secure the baskets so they don't move around while you're driving. Buy some bungee cords to keep your baskets secure in the bunk or cabinets. If you want more information on proper storage and food storage ideas, check out the Truckers Network blog, 5 helpful organization tips for truck drivers.
You're listening to tncradio.live. This is Keep On Talking with your host, Tom Kyrk.
Back in the day, well, many drivers did make friends over the CB radio. Another place you could make friends and sometimes lifelong companions was at the truck stops. Jerry shares with us his recollections of these relationships that would form at the truck stops. Some of these memories do get into some details, but it's important to remember trucking is all about real life. And Jerry's stories don't get much more real than this.
Something else it used to be a lot of, because, you know, with Interstate, we operated from Milton, Pennsylvania to Toledo, Ohio, to Bangor, Maine, to Greenville, South Carolina, in that region. And a lot of the carriers worked that way. You know, the freight just relayed on west. So that meant that you had your favorite stops. Even if you weren't stopping every day, some guys did stop. In fact, if they're on a turn, they'd stop twice a day. So we were regulars in a way. You even got to know the waitresses and everything. And back in that era of time, the waitresses were all, will do this, being a little naughty. Or young girls. And Now we'll add this to it. Little hot the truck type cuties, right? And and now they're all my age, by the way. So anyhow, you'd be surprised the truck stop romances.
Oh, I can imagine.
And the same thing.
Now, were you a bit of a truck stop Romeo or Lothario?
I plead the fifth.
You refuse to answer on the grounds that your wife may be listening to this show.
Yeah. That may even get me in trouble. Not only at the truck stops, but see, a lot of the places where we laid over, was pretty much everybody ran the same relays. Like out of Memphis here, if the load's going to California, most all the carriers, let's say it started in Cincinnati. The next load transferred to Memphis, came through Memphis. Memphis ran to Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City ran to something or other, New Mexico. So most of the carriers, their relays were all located in the same towns. So there were very little sleeper operations on this. Everything was day cabs. So like at Indianapolis, Toledo, Buffalo, and I mentioned the Statler Hilton at Buffalo, they kept the train crews do the same thing, the airlines. So a lot of these hotels specialized in servicing not just trucking, but transportation. The railroads relay the same way we do. So, but anyway, different time, different place. You didn't have all the drug testing, alcohol testing, and everything like that, which we probably should have, by the way. So, and then at Indianapolis, I don't know how many trucking companies they have in there. I think in Indianapolis, that motel ran like 3 and 4 vans. St. Louis, same way. So you'd be sitting there at the table and come over to the loudspeaker. Van's leaving for Hall Street. Well, that means there'd be several of us to get up, run, and get in the van. So these vans, just like they come around the airports, went around to the trucking terminals. So, and I could safely say this to be 95% of the time. What do you think is just down the street from one of these trucker hotel motels? A cowboy bar.
Yep. I was going to say a bar of some kind, but
yeah. Now, because we made the top of the market in wages back then, and so truck drivers could be kind of a target to become a husband. We were. So what do you think hangs out at these bars? The young hotties, the Lonely Hearts clubs, and stuff like that. A lot of them had bands, so it a wild time. Let me tell you something. I can remember guys helping each other back to the hotel. I couldn't even stand up and get 4 hours sleep, and away they go. Some of them would get almost no sleep. If you ran from Toledo to Pittsburgh, it's only a 6-hour run. You weren't tired enough to go to the room. So these guys had, like, not that many, but there was too much, let's put it that way. They'd take a liquid 8. There was a word for it. They'd leave their suitcase at the counter at the motel, go down to the bar and take their load call, sit in the bar, to go back out again. They get a short distance from the terminal. We didn't have sleepers. It wasn't a seat truck. Some of these guys could sleep 3 or 4 hours, sleeping it off, laying over the steering wheel. And we had almost no wrecks ran. It was amazing the way some of these guys were. And I had a friend of mine, Walter Johnson. Boy, he was a heavy drinker. Big partier. Big Chain was his radio handle. Walter was crazy. And I don't know whether I ever never saw Walter sober, or I couldn't tell the difference, whatever. But everywhere he went, it was never bothered him, by the way. You get me, I couldn't do it. Give me 2 beers and you'll have to carry me out. So I saved a lot of money. Big drinking back in those days. You know, kind of a girlfriend in every port type thing. That did happen. There was a lot of that. I'll tell you one that's funny. It was like crazy. We had a driver out of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Paul was his name. So he goes to Pittsburgh, and he's got like a couple hours left. So he may run Pittsburgh in 6 hours. So he's not necessarily sleepy yet when he gets to Pittsburgh. Well, he gets a girlfriend in Pittsburgh. He's married. So the girlfriend is really beginning to take this serious. And then there's another driver out of Carlstadt had a girlfriend in Pittsburgh. Well, these two girls are friends. They take this wild hare one night, jump in the car in Pittsburgh to go down and visit Paul at his house. Ooh. They go up and knock on the door. Paul said he'd like to have a heart attack when he's standing. So they pulled something on the lady. Said, "No, I think you got the wrong address. I'll give you one better than that." An Eastern Express driver out of Stamford, Connecticut. He used to run Somerset, Pennsylvania, 3 rounds a week. And I knew he was good friends with my father. I kind of knew him, okay? Well, he gets a girlfriend in Somerset. And he begins to live with her in Somerset. Like it's his family. So she doesn't know about the wife in Stamford. The wife doesn't know about the girlfriend in Somerset. Well, eventually, Eastern changes its operation to about 2 hours west of Somerset.
Yep.
So the girlfriend in Somerset thinks they're going to move to Newstead. So now the girlfriend, like wife type person in Somerset thinks that, like the other drivers' wives in that area, they're all going to move to Somerset. And that's where the whole thing falls apart. The wife-girlfriend like person in Somerset discovers that he's married. The wife in Stamford finds out about this long-time girlfriend in Somerset. Now, I don't know whatever happened in the end, but let me tell you something. Highway romances and stuff. Oh, yeah. In fact, get this. My father was guilty of that. He's 6'6", 285 pounds. Big man. He could wrestle a steer or a Holstein cow to her knees, right?
Yep.
The only person that ever gave my father, who looked like Paul Bunyan, the only person that ever gave him a black eye in his life was my mother, who found out about the girlfriend in Bedford.
Yeah,
and the way
I can imagine.
The way she reached his eye, you know, these hand-carved, real fancy leather purses?
Yep.
She grabbed that leather purse and right in his eye with a full swipe. So he was guilty of it too. And then when I came on the road with Interstate, my mother and father didn't know real well, by the way. Those two lived to fight with each other.
Yep.
So anyway, we get on the road. Dad's running 3 rounds a week to Pittsburgh. He's got a dedicated run, right? And within the first trip or so, we go on the side. He says, he's listening. He says, I know we're father and son, but he says, on a job, we're just fellow drivers. That's the way I want it. And he says, another thing. I said, what's that? He says, you don't see anything, and I don't see anything. Out on the road.
So what happens on the road stays on the road.
You know, this one, this one I can only be suspicious of. And things happened that night that I didn't make the move. So I checked into Pittsburgh. It's a Saturday night.
Yep.
And this lady worked at the motel. And there were times I kind of thought, she's a little older than I am. I kind of thought I was getting a look over. I could just really feel it in a half a smile type thing. I was, whoa, what's going on here? So anyway, I go out and we had a Chevrolet station wagon. I ran back and forth and I had 3 vehicles. They used to put over 200 drivers a day through that motel off exit 4 of the Best Western. Yeah, that's how many relays. They were turning the rooms, you know, like if a driver come in at midnight, 8, 9 in the morning, he left, they cleaned the room and bring another one right in. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the way they worked. So she's a good-looking woman, by the way, and had a nice physical appearance about her, too, enticing. So I go out to get in the station wagon, and the next thing I know, she kind of yells out the window, she says, you drive. I said, oh, okay. So I get in the car. Oh, my God. She's got her blouse all opened up, her dress pulled way back, and just sitting there grinning at me. I said, oh, my God. And it didn't happen. Not necessarily because it didn't want to, but just it didn't happen, okay? So later on, I found out. That night she quit, by the way. Later on, a friend of my dad's out of Indianapolis, he says, well, don't you know your dad and her had it going on?
Oh.
And I said, no. And then it hit me. Oh, she was about to add some points to the excitement in her life. To sleep with the father and the son.
Yep.
But I didn't see it. I didn't say it. And I didn't know for sure. Just Dad's friend Ernie in Indianapolis knew about it because I didn't get to Pittsburgh that often.
Right.
Because Dad was running a 3-round week, and that was when these kind of things were most likely to happen.
Even today, you hear stories about how certain women may set their sights on truck drivers, whether it's for the adventure, the mystique of trucking, hopes for a better of life. Nothing has changed. Whether it's the reality of trucking, as Jerry has shared it to us today, or stories such as Smokey and the Bandit, Convoy, something about the mystique of the American truck driver brings the thought that there should be romance of the road.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 easy steps to help truckers stay awake while driving. Driving 11 hours a day, 7 days a week can be emotionally and physically exhausting. Sleep's a very important part of a long-haul truck driver's life. Being well rested and alert makes driving a lot more safe for both the trucker and other drivers on the road. Getting enough sleep may sound easier than it seems. Living on the road makes it difficult to get the recommended 8 hours of sleep. In fact, it's common for truckers to not get 8 hours of sleep due to the 11-hour work shift. To help, we've put together 5 tips to help truckers stay awake while driving. Take vitamins. One way truckers can stay awake while driving is by taking vitamins. Not only are vitamins good energy boosters, they have tons of other health benefits too. Vitamin B helps with fatigue, depression, mood boosting, and muscle weakness. Consider adding vitamins to your morning routine. Eat healthy. An unhealthy diet has a huge impact on one's overall health. Jennifer Sachak, PhD now, says, our bodies rely on the energy and nutrients we get from food. So what you eat, and how and when you eat it, can either drain you or sustain you. It might be more convenient to stop at a fast food restaurant or truck stop, but constantly eating junk food drains your energy. Check out our blog on quick and healthy meals for truckers for healthy food ideas. Take a nap. Before you hit the road, consider taking a short 20-minute nap. Several studies have shown that a quick nap immediately increases alertness and gives a boost in cognitive performance. Stay hydrated. Water has many health benefits. One benefit is reducing the chance of being fatigued. Drinking a pint of cold water is a great way to refresh yourself and stay more alert. Listen to upbeat music. Listening to upbeat music will have you tapping your foot, singing along, and staying alert in no time. Avoid listening to relaxing music or audiobooks. These tend to make drivers more relaxed and sleepy. Truckers have a very demanding job. In order to deal with the stress and demand, it's very important to get the right amount of sleep. Hopefully, these 5 tips will help truckers stay awake while driving. This blog has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
This is Alec Debogorski, and you are listening to TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back to Keep On Talkin' on TNCRadio.live. Here's Tom Kyrk.
Life on the road doesn't get much more real than, well, the highway romance. But sometimes they can cause trouble. Our friend, Nookie Monster, Jerry Fritts, shares some stories about how, well, sometimes romance didn't go exactly as planned on the road.
Here's another one. Trucking romance. Payday is like 6'6", 6'7", big basketball type, right? Firm build I am. Good looking man. And according to other drivers, There are certain physical things about payday that you could say be sought after, or at least that rumor, right? A lot of silly stuff.
Fair enough.
But payday also had one of these girlfriend in every port. And that was before we moved to Memphis. And he worked for Strickland out of Little Rock at that time, but they laid over a lot in Dallas. So payday gets a girlfriend in Dallas. And you always run the risk of when you start that girlfriend stuff, the girlfriend stuff starts seeing stars in her eyes. Long-term relationship, right?
Yep.
Well, it turns out that his girlfriend is married to another Strickland driver in Dallas. Yeah. So payday decides it's time to break it off. There's plenty of drivers laughing at payday. He doesn't deny it. It did happen. And he said, we just couldn't get rid of that woman. See, payday's in it for something else. She's in it for something else, too.
Yeah.
So payday's just out here sporting around, okay? So you always run that risk, though. The other side may not see it as necessarily a sport. So anyway, he's trying to dump her. And she finds out he's about to leave the terminal in Dallas for Strickland. And she drops in behind him at the red light or pulls her or something like that. But he's trying to tell her, go away, go away. However this happens, she goes nuts. She gets in behind him at the red light and starts banging her pickup truck in the back of Strickland's trailer that payday's driving.
Okay.
And I know this to be 95% true because we inherited a lot of these Strickland drivers when we bought out Strickland. And we all moved to Memphis, and they'd all tease him about it. So he kind of had that reputation, too. Some really crazy things, I'm telling you. So there was that side of that era of trucking. It would probably go from the mid-50s to deregulation. Maybe about 25 years.
When you say deregulation, about what year would that be?
1980.
Okay.
Is when all this stuff started cracking apart, and the rate at which it cracked apart accelerated and turned into a total collapse eventually, worse than anybody ever thought. So
now,
see that period. That was the CB radio period. That's when the wages started getting astronomical, if you want to call it that. And it's the best the drivers ever had, the best the carriers that knew how to work it had it. Greatest time in the trucking of history, both for the quality of the job, the pay of the job, and the environment even that we worked in. If you want to include all this partying stuff and everything like that, yeah, it all happened. But you know,
now,
I see it as the great cowboy era that our country still eulogizes. Really only the cattle herds, the cowboy towns, and Batmasters and Hickok and all that. You know, that was only like a 25-year period. But it burned into the psyche of the American experience. It only lasted 20, 25 years, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I look back now, and I say to myself, wow, was I lucky? I got in about the middle of it. And should some of this stuff happen, I don't judge other people for romance and stuff, because you don't know what's going on at home.
Exactly.
You know, I've had women say, well, my husband couldn't keep it in his pants. Well, you talk to the husband, he hasn't had any sex for 2 months. So I don't judge anymore. I don't take sides because you don't know what's going on, really. So, you know, and I really, really feel very fortunate because it was so good. Even some of my business training and stuff, I can remember some of the things that went on when the unionized drivers, that core of hardcore union people, they talk about management abusing employees. That did happen. The sweatshop era did happen. It was real. Now, some of these people that had worked their way out of the sweatshop era always kind of wanted to get back at management for being treated that badly then. So when everything began to get good, they couldn't put it down. They were resentful. They kept on. And in a way, that group there actually overdid it and contributed to the demise of the union. So you had all that going on too. So a lot of stuff, a different time. And from time to time, I'd say to myself, and I'll tell you where I gave it up here recently, by the way. Could we recreate that? Now, if you could recreate that, the so-called driver turnover thing would go away. Watch how I like to hand it to management and be a little bit curt with them. They would say, well, we don't want the union. It got so bad the union couldn't fire their employees, the misbehaved employees. That was kind of true. I saw that. So that was what we called the 10%ers on the board, the ones who just had to punish management all the time. And they should have been fired. But due to the union thing, they didn't get fired. Now, at the same time, what management didn't see, that was offset. I call them the deadbeats. They took as much as they could for as little as possible.
Yep.
But, that's kind of the herd, really. Because at the other end of that spectrum, you had another 10%, let's say, that did far more than they had to. And it was just because that's the way they were wired.
You put in a fair day's work for a fair day's pay.
Oh, and they, for some reason, I'm one of those. I don't care. When I go to work, you're going to get 110% of me. And I can't tell you why. It's not just the way I'm wired. So then you had the 80% core in there, right? That did the good day's stuff for the good day's pay. But now in the meantime, remember, these carriers had almost no turnover. And we proved that. So today, when I hear management say, well, we don't want the union because we can't fire our people when we want to. It's okay. I said, then how do you explain this to me? Without a union, nearly 100% of your employees are firing you every year.
I hope you've enjoyed getting to know Jerry Fritts. As you can see, he's an easy person to keep on talking with. And he's a great example of real life out here on the road, with his collection of stories, both personal, things that were shared to him, memories of trucking and its history, the advantages of being a union as well as a non-union driver. Jerry's going to be a frequent guest, and I've hoped you got a chance getting to know our good friend Jerry Fritts, the Nookie Monster. Be sure to tune in for future episodes of Keep On Talkin' Live. Real life, live on the road. With me, Tom Kyrk.